In 2005, a 46-year-old woman named Pippa Plaisted underwent a 45-minute breast cancer operation, almost a minute for every year she'd been alive. This was at Lister Hospital in London, and she used only hypnosis for pain management. The surgery was, according to her, entirely pain-free, with Plainstead stating, "The surgeon was cutting and sewing inside me, but I could not feel any sensation at all. It was as if she had hit mute on reality. And it wasn't a miracle, it was hypnosis." So case studies like this really do make me intrigued to crack open what does happen in your brain when seemingly impossible things become possible. When you think of hypnosis, do you think of a scientifically studied practice for over 2 centuries that is accepted by the medical, psychiatric, psychological, and even dental associations across the world? Or do you think of this? Well, you are back in the room, and I definitely used to think of hypnotherapy exclusively as the latter. A trick by stage magicians simply using setups to fool an audience rather than real magic. Or maybe a power that a mystic might claim whilst working from an incense-filled cave who will read you star signs and tarot cards and predict mysterious difficulties and successes in your future. When I thought of hypnosis, I would not have thought of it as a legitimate backup option for people with sensitivities to anesthetic drugs to be able to receive extensive surgeries without any pain or discomfort. I also would not have thought of it as a technique that, over many repeated studies, has helped anxiety sufferers improve their symptoms more than 79% compared to their control counterparts. Or in fact, I also wouldn't have believed that hypnosis has helped 78% of heroin addicts stay clear of their addictions for 2 years post an intervention with hypnosis. In fact, it does seem to be getting more attention these days. Matt Damon used hypnosis to quit smoking. Adele used hypnosis in her weight loss journey, and Tiger Woods even used it to calm his performance pressures whilst playing golf. So considering all of this, and the fact that I am a scientifically minded person who needs to know how things really work before I can believe them, today we are digging into the psychology of hypnosis, separating the facts from fiction and finding out what is actually going on in your brain when you use hypnosis to access the subconscious, and what can you use hypnosis for in your everyday life, what can't you use it for, and why is it so misunderstood. Hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Psychology Podcast. I am Sam Webster Harris, your host, as always, diving into the real science behind self-improvement and using an extra serving of psychology and philosophy where I can to help work out what the hell it means to live a life well lived. We are certainly in for an exciting episode today with some myth busting, and it is a pleasure to have you here. Let's dig in. Now, I should start by saying that surgery using only hypnosis is definitely not common practice, and it has only been done in very highly hypnotizable people who are also unable to use drugs, and they do test a lot before they do anything. But there are also progressive studies across Europe, in France, Belgium, and Switzerland, using hypnosis to allow patients to stay awake whilst receiving small amounts of local anesthetics and able to avoid having a general anesthetic and ultimately take much less drugs. In Switzerland, in fact, hypnosis isn't even considered an alternative medicine. It's a legitimate option in a third of hospitals for some surgical procedures. A 200-patient study gave a pre-surgery 15-minute hypnosis session and found on average patients felt the same amount of pain relief with 30% less local anesthetics during a surgery, and they were calmer for the operation. And then in the post results, things were even better. They had 40% less bleeding, half the nausea. Monetarily, they found that each patient receiving the hypnosis had about $1,000 less costs associated with their total treatment due to the faster recovery time and less problems. So if it can affect us at a subconscious level enough that we can't feel pain, or it can change our actual health outcomes, what else can it do on our subconscious is an interesting question. Before we go on a tour of what hypnosis can do, let's start with what hypnosis can't do, some clear examples, and then explain how it actually works. You've probably heard the general trope, the evil hypnotist who makes people rob banks or assassinate presidents. In real life, that hasn't happened. There was an infamous case in Denmark in 1951 where a man claimed to have been hypnotized into committing armed robbery where he actually killed people. But ultimately, it turns out that your subconscious does have ethics. You can't be hypnotized to do anything that violates your core values or anything you don't actually want to do. Whether that is robbing a bank or going on a date with an unattractive hypnotist, it's not going to happen no matter how deep the trance. But as we'll see, it can rewire your cravings, your fears, and even your immune system. So how does this science fiction sounding concept actually work? Well, imagine your brain has a backseat driver, the nagging voice that says, "What if I screw up?" or "This is going to hurt." Well, that's your default mode network. It's the part of the brain that is associated with conscious awareness for self-reflection, but sometimes it is too active, which is why it's associated with rumination over past failures, anxiety about upcoming events, and it's heavily linked to anxiety, depression, and ADHD. If you're interested in a deep dive into the default mode network, it's fascinating, and I did an episode all about it called Loud Thoughts in April 2024. But how is the default mode network related to hypnosis? In 2019, Stanford researchers put people in fMRI machines and hypnotized them and watched what happened in their brains. And the result was that the default mode network, which is the heart of our self-doubt, it went dark. Activity dropped by 70%. Meanwhile, the visual and motor cortexes lit up like Vegas. And basically, this means your inner critic and your overly conscious self gets fired, and your imagination becomes reality as you have access to your subconscious thoughts. So using the analogy of GPS, normally your conscious mind is your route planner, calculating every turn, every decision you make. In hypnosis, it's kind of like handing the wheel to your subconscious, which knows the shortcuts you've forgotten. And that's why hypnotized smokers can suddenly hate the smell of cigarettes, or why baseball pitchers can cure their yips overnight. The subconscious isn't just there along for the ride, you can actually let it gain control again. The Royal College of Psychiatrists describes hypnotherapy as creating a state of focused attention and reduced critical thought. It allows a person to become immersed in images that help to change unhelpful ideas and associations. This top-down regulatory process enables verbal suggestions during hypnotherapy to influence thought patterns and emotional responses. Researchers observed that hypnotic suggestions produce measurable changes in relevant brain areas, providing neurological evidence for hypnotherapy's effects. Okay, that was a long quote, but this all begs the question, if you can mute pain, erase phobias, and rewire habits, what else is your brain hiding from you? And that is where the adventure begins. And as we go into this adventure, I would like to say that today's episode is sponsored by Hypnozio, a self-hypnosis app. And before you tune out now, I have complete creative license to write whatever I want and investigate the topic using my own scientific approach for learning, and I am delighted to be given the chance to explore this topic. We'll certainly review the real uses and also limitations of hypnosis, whilst also comparing the limitations of self-hypnosis using apps like Hypnozio compared to in-person hypnotherapists, and the different pros and cons involved, because this is a show about real science and not just opinions. I have spent a lot of time on this episode fact-checking because the world is full of some crazy stuff when you try to find out about hypnosis. And I am genuinely very interested in reporting on just the real science and supporting genuinely useful products. And this episode certainly is a celebration of both. So now let's talk about sleep. We know hypnosis can make surgery painless, but what about the other tortures we inflict on ourselves, perhaps like him? I'm talking about lying awake at 3 a.m., mentally replaying the awkward thing you said in 2012. This is something I have a problem with, but there is a good amount of science around how hypnosis can help with sleep. Several meta-analysis studies on insomniacs have shown that 60% of them report benefits from using a hypnosis recording for sleep. And MRI scans showed that their brains were doing something kind of extraordinary whilst this happened. Two things lit up. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is your brain's safety signal hub, and then the parohippocampal gyrus, which is where your memory is stored and accessed. And basically what that means is that hypnosis convinced their subconscious that sleep was actually now safe and they didn't have to worry about something or deal with it. And they let their nervous system relax and turn off their hypervigilance. No more the what if this person doesn't like my email, or what if the kettle is on, etc., etc. Just, oh, sleep. Now, there are some great tools out there to help you do this yourself, but one technique that you can do without any guidance is the 4-7-8 breathing technique. It's a bit like a password for your vagus nerve, where you simply breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds. And if you do this 4 times in a row, it mimics the breathing pattern of your stage 1 sleep. It basically tricks your brain into following suit and starting to sleep. And a fun fact is that this is even taught in the Navy SEAL training. Some other weird things that you can do is if you're stuck in your mental chatter, you can try thinking or saying to yourself things like, my pillow feels heavier, or each breath slows down my thoughts. And try not to give yourself affirmations or observations. Studies found that this works about 3 times better than trying to will yourself to go to sleep with demands, which often just adds pressure and panic to you, which of course activates your nervous system and makes you less sleepy. As I already mentioned, I was pretty skeptical of hypnosis, but I have definitely suffered from sleep issues with my own overactive default mode network, thanks to ADHD. But I have definitely noticed some improvements by trying these things. So now my general go-to stack of stuff to help me with sleeping is having a notepad next to me to just get any thoughts out that I might be thinking about so that I just definitely know I don't have to think about them. Having a set of earplugs and eye shades, going to sleep at a consistent time. And then, yes, using this breathing technique and listening to a sleep hypnosis recording, it really does put you in a calm state, ready for sleep. It is crazy how good it is, and the fact that it isn't any mystical magic. It's just simply using the right ways to talk with the brain. Now, of course, hypnosis doesn't work for everyone, and I will give a summary of its limitations later in the episode. Don't worry. For example, I'm pretty sensitive to caffeine, and there's no amount of hypnosis that will get me to sleep whilst I've had caffeine. Now, I think sleep is possibly one of the most obvious options for hypnosis. But what about your taste buds? Imagine biting into a crisp stalk of celery and instead tasting warm apple pie. That isn't completely a fantasy. It even happened to patients in London's Royal Free Hospital when researchers used hypnosis to hijack their taste buds. And that's just the appetizer for how hypnosis can reprogram our relationship with food and movement. A wide analysis of several weight loss trials found that on average, hypnosis patients kept twice as much weight off in the long term compared to just dieting alone. That's because whilst diets change what you eat, hypnosis can change what you want to eat. And when done correctly, MRI scans show that hypnosis reduces activity in the nucleus accumbens, which is the brain's craving headquarters. It genuinely meant that people viewed junk food differently and could even turn broccoli's texture from soggy to satisfyingly crunchy at a neural level in people's heads. Now, besides how you taste and experience food, there's a lot of unconscious associations with food that we develop throughout our lives, particularly during childhood when food is often used as a reward or comfort mechanism. And the associations that we create can then lead to lifelong habitual patterns where certain foods become connected to emotional states like feeling loved or comforted. When it comes to things like sugar addiction, hypnotherapy's access to the subconscious can really help people remove the positive associations with sugar and untangle all the different feelings in our head and reframe people's thinking with new information and better desires. And I'll be honest, it does all sound a bit mad, but if you accept that hypnosis gives a better access to the subconscious and suggestions of what the subconscious opinions are, you can see why it has longer lasting impacts than just diet alone. Because if you're trying to just use willpower to resist food that you want, it can work for a while, but you're likely going to snap back. If you can instead learn to think of foods and rewards differently, that's clearly a much better long-term approach, which is what most people are trying to build when they're building a new healthy habit. And of course, there's the topic of exercise. As well as sleep, the Navy SEALs train using another hypnosis trick when it comes to exercise. They deliberately try to pair extreme exertion with positive verbal cues. So they'll say things like, "This burning means progress." And they use this hypnotic technique of anchoring, where they are linking physical effort to pleasure chemicals in the brain. And here's a kind of rough idea of how to try it and how it works. So during your next workout, you could identify the moment of peak exertion, like your final push-up. And immediately afterwards, you close your eyes and visualize golden light flooding into your muscles. And then you whisper a cue word like "yes" with intense feeling. And yes, it sounds weird, but after 3 to 5 sessions, simply saying your cue word will trigger a dopamine release even pre-workout. This is shown to increase enjoyment and cut the perceived effort of workouts by 20%. As I said, it sounds weird, But it does sort of work, and that's a comment we'll probably hear a bit in this episode. And as I said earlier, if it's all sounding too good to be true, don't worry, later we will go through a full analysis of efficacy of some of these claims and who this works for and doesn't, and learning about problems and myths. Don't worry. But as we have been learning about how we can reprogram cravings, it does make you wonder what else is possible, like perhaps quitting smoking cold turkey and claims around that. As we heard at the start, Matt Damon quit smoking after 3 sessions of hypnotherapy. And in fact, there genuinely do seem to be cases of individuals who have gone to see a hypnotherapist and quit cold turkey on the spot. Apparently, Anthony Hopkins, the legendary actor who played Hannibal and, well, millions of roles, he fell into a heavy drinking, self-destructive spiral and would often wake up on the floor of a hotel with no clue what day it was. He saw a hypnotherapist one day in London and in a single 90-minute session was completely cured. And in his own words, he said, "The man told me you don't need alcohol anymore, and something clicked. I walked out, never drank again. It was like a miracle." And yes, that does seem pretty miraculous. For many of us, addiction is a very messy beast, and I wouldn't suggest that it could be solved as easily as a single 90-minute session for pretty much all people. Obviously, if that was the case, the world would be a very different place. However, the effect of hypnotherapy on alcohol and tobacco has been extensively studied. It has been shown that hypnotherapy can allow for deep changes to occur and, quote, help individuals take back control over life and behavior. For alcohol, it's been shown to be as effective as counseling, but it's also recommended as just a complementary approach with other things rather than a standalone treatment. For smoking cessation, an analysis back in 1992 looked at statistics across 70,000 people and found that hypnotherapy made it nearly 15 times more likely to succeed in quitting smoking than just quitting cold turkey. So definitely worth thinking about trying if you're feeling ready to take on quitting. And how does it work? Well, addiction hijacks 3 of your brain circuits. Firstly, the craving loop, which is in your ventral tegmental area if you're interested. Then there's our habit highway in the dorsal striatum, and then your rationalization zone in the prefrontal cortex. You'll have to trust me that those are all things in your brain that do stuff. The thing about hypnosis is it can attack all 3 of them. A 2023 Nature study showed that hypnosis quietens the craving loop by 62% when you see an external trigger. It can then help to rewire the habit highway by creating new if-then pathways. So if I see vodka, I taste vinegar, for example. And then most crucially, it helps sync up our rationalization area, the PFC, with our actions, which lets logic actually have a say in what you do compared to just your impulses. So an example from a former smoker who described his hypnosis experience. He said, "The therapist had me imagine cigarettes were made of rotting fish. Now, when I smell smoke anywhere, my nose wrinkles like I've just stepped in garbage." When people viewed scans of his brain, it was confirmed that his brain was now processing tobacco smoke as a threat and not as a reward. Now, again, I do want to say that just seeing a hypnotherapist won't magically make you quit. In fact, in a publicized hypnotherapy session, Ellen DeGeneres famously was cured of smoking after 5 minutes of hypnotherapy with Paul McKenna. And I'll put the link for you on YouTube. It's interesting to watch the way he does it. However, after a few months, she started smoking again. And actually, she eventually quit a few years later using the easy way method. So I will say again, hypnotherapy isn't necessarily magic, but it is a very low risk intervention that seems to have little to no drawbacks and can certainly just help push the balance in your favor and complement various other strategies at the same time. Now, hypnotherapy has been used for loads and loads of things like performance and mindset, memory recall in police investigations, and memory reframing for trauma victims. But the last thing I really want to address in this episode is anxiety, because I think it's one of the biggest problems these days for people. And it has by far the most verified published science compared to those other topics that I just mentioned. But if you are interested to hear an episode about those, let me know and I'll see what I can do. Just as I had the many caveats with smoking, there's a similar story when it comes to anxiety and phobias. For example, Drew Barrymore suffered from claustrophobia, and with the help of hypnotherapy, she was able to overcome that, as well as some of her wider anxiety problems and panic attacks. A wide meta-analysis showed that on average, individuals treated with hypnotherapy had a greater anxiety relief than 80% of control participants who didn't receive treatment. But it's important to add that the best effect was when it was combined with other psychological interventions rather than just by itself. But we are still left with the fact that it's better to have hypnotherapy than to do nothing. And as I enjoy looking into the psychology of fear, how does hypnotherapy work when it comes to anxiety and phobias? Well, anxiety stems from an overactive threat detection network. If you've been listening to the show for a while, we reviewed this in our episode about the psychology of fear, but here's a super quick overview. You have the amygdala, the fear siren, then the anterior cingulate cortex, which is like your error detector, and then, of course, the default mode network we've spoken about a lot today, which is where you do all your ruminating. Hypnosis helps anxiety by working on all of these. It can mute your amygdala, where you detect fears, by a whopping 40%. It then strengthens the links between your anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal cortex, so you do better error processing and you're less likely to panic and work out what it is that's going on without reacting to it. And finally, it helps to slow down your default mode network and stop the what if panic spiral. So essentially, hypnosis helps slow down the panic flywheel and give time for your reasoning part of the brain to come online and think more rationally about the situation. A few other interesting pieces of advice to help when it comes to catastrophization or a moment of panic. One is to dip your face in cold water, which activates your vagus nerve and helps calm you down. Another very practical option is to hum any tune for 5 seconds. It engages the vocal cords and has a link to your parasympathetic system, which helps calm your nervous system down, which I think is pretty neat that you can just access that anytime and you don't need to see a hypnotherapist or use an app. However, on that, I am delighted to announce that this is the first time in my life that I've been organized enough to get a directly relevant sponsor for an episode who has been willing to pay me to investigate a topic and see what I can find. So I am delighted to recommend Hypnozio. I have enjoyed using their app for sleep hypnosis after using it, and their insomnia course was really good for getting to sleep at night. And I've also found it useful for napping in the day when I know that I'm tired enough to need a nap, but find that I'm going to waste the first 40 minutes of the nap trying to get to sleep. Anyway, what is Hypnozio? It is a self-hypnotherapy app designed to help you harness the power of your own subconscious mind with over 9,000 positive reviews on Trustpilot. They have a comprehensive range of different hypnosis options for not just sleep, but also things like addictions, smoking, alcohol, drugs, courses for cultivating confidence, reducing anxiety, improving relationships, and also improving your relationship with food and fitness. As I've had time to look through some of the different courses, they do have a very in-depth range, which will likely be able to go more into your specific issues on a topic. For example, the eating course has 9 different series within it to support you across the journey. It starts with a foundational series on eating habits before going into virtual gastric band series and a series on dealing with binge eating. So if you're on the go and busy and unsure how you're going to find the time to address your issues, I do think Hypnozio is a fantastic low-risk option. They have an affordable membership, and if you're interested to try it out, you can go to Hypnozio and using my code GROWTH15, you can grab 15% off your first subscription with Hypnozio. That's code GROWTH15, and there will be a link in the description to definitely access it. So thanks a lot to Hypnozio for sponsoring this episode, and in general for making the power of hypnosis accessible to people. And now, of course, I couldn't be promoting a hypnosis app without providing an honest review of the pros and cons of using an app for self-hypnosis versus using a personal hypnotherapist. Because I have to be very real with you, a qualified hypnotherapist can tailor sessions to your specific needs, preferences, goals, and adapt techniques and suggestions based on your individual circumstances in real time. Self-hypnotherapy apps, like Hypnozio, offer pre-recorded sessions, which they may have many of, and they are designed to do their best with a range for you to try from, but they can't be as customizable or responsible to your unique situation as a professional. And so not only do live hypnotherapists have extensive training and experience, you can of course ask them questions, receive feedback, which is nice, and seeing a real person adds a level of accountability, support, and motivation. Certainly, if you have more complex issues like trauma, phobias, or deep-rooted behavioral patterns, it's often necessary to seek out a live hypnotherapist if you want to get to the core of those problems. However, apps are more suitable for general relaxation, stress reduction, and if you want to sleep, it's much easier to just listen to a hypnosis recording than it is to go and see someone. It's not exactly convenient to go to someone's office every time you want to sleep, for example. And to be honest, this is where the power feature of apps come in, because it's their accessibility. They can be in your pocket anywhere, anytime, which is of course useful for not only sleep, but in general, if you have an overwhelming feeling like an urge to smoke or surging anxiety, you know that it's there in your pocket and able to support you at any moment. You can just do a session without waiting for a live person to have time for you. And of course, if you go traveling, it's also always there with you. Then there's the affordability factor. Apps are cheaper than a real person, which also means that it's a sustainable option to use alongside other strategies, which might be seeing a real hypnotherapist or a psychotherapist or whatever else you might choose to use. So ultimately, as we've been learning throughout this episode, hypnosis is just very low risk as an intervention. It doesn't have many drawbacks in trying it. And sure, if you have the money, there could be a lot of value in seeing a real hypnotherapist. And since doing this deep dive, I'm like, maybe I do want to see a real hypnotherapist. Like, why the hell not? Growth mindset. Whether you have deep issues or you just want to be more confident, like if hypnotherapy works for Tiger Woods to increase his mental game, then like, why not try it? Here's my conclusion here. Like, growth mindset is all about finding growth in unexpected places after all. And this is certainly an area that I was more averse to when I was young. And then finally, there's also the factor of who does hypnosis work for? I did say I'd talk about some general statistics of who hypnosis works for best. Well, and the freedom to allow new ideas to access your subconscious depends on how suggestible you are, which is a clinical term. Roughly 10% of people are thought to be highly suggestible individuals. This might explain events like Anthony Hopkins having one session to cure his alcohol addiction, or that lady Pippa who had her entire surgery without any anesthetic. Equally, to the 10% of people that are highly suggestible, there's about 10% of the population are thought to be low suggestibility, which means, conveniently, about 80% of us are in the middle and we respond well and receive benefits from hypnosis. Importantly, I should say that being highly suggestible or low suggestibility is neither good or bad. There is certainly a lot of stigma out there to highly suggestible people who are perhaps just dumb and will believe anything or suckers for whatever's going. But actually, it's shown that generally, suggestibility is related to people who are more open and more creative. And of course, we see that actually younger people, especially kids, respond better to hypnotherapy. This also might explain why there are long lists of celebrities and artists and actors who have used hypnotherapy, because they are generally on the creative end. It might be that they just have the money to go and see hypnotherapists. Anyway, who knows? And I'm actually not sure how good those lists are, as during putting this episode together, I have gone on no end of rabbit holes of mythical claims of hypnotherapy that I had to fact check, and half of them are completely untrue. But hopefully everything in this episode is true, because I have done just a lot of checking. You're welcome to send me any emails of things you think I said are wrong. But this raises an important related point, harking back to the start of the show, on the mystic side of the brand of hypnosis. There are a lot of people out there who not just believe in hypnosis, but they want to believe in the magical side of it as well, which leads them to over-promote its benefits, claims like it'll cure your cancer or whatever. They also might create long fictitious lists of celebrities and other crazy claims of miracle cures using hypnosis. I think this issue is also encouraged by the media, who portray hypnotists as magicians. The example I gave of Ellen DeGeneres being hypnotized by Paul McKenna, he's definitely portrayed as this wonderful mystical guy who can cure people of these things. If a doctor cuts off your finger with gangrene, you don't go, "Ooh, he separated the gangrene from my body and his two things parted, and when I left the hospital I never saw the finger again. It disappeared. Magic." No, you go, "The doctor cut off my finger." But when a hypnotist does something, we go, "Ooh, the magical hypnotist has performed his special act on this person to change their subconscious." And it creates this illusion of magic, as opposed to this is actual neuroscience. It's just working with natural processes within your body, the same as a doctor works with natural processes within your body. Because of the mysticism then related to it, there are plenty of people who really don't want to believe in hypnosis. They just assume that due to all those people who are spouting nonsense about it, that hypnosis itself must also be nonsense. Now, As I said, that is a group of people I certainly used to be a member of until I got more into psychology and understanding how things like the default mode network operates. So actually, when we dig under all the noise and start doing some critical thinking, we see that the science is showing there are very real benefits. And even if it can't cure cancer, it's worth people understanding how it works and some of the many practical benefits it holds, even if some of them are a bit less newsworthy. And the reason I'm saying this is because it links back to the efficacy that we're talking about. You can't be a suggestible person for hypnosis to work on if you don't think it will work. And it's also shown in general that if you have a flawed understanding of the subject of hypnosis, then that can impact your suggestibility. So all in all, that means that hypnosis is cool. And if you understand it and believe it, then there's a good chance it will actually help you more than a placebo if you are open to it. So whether you want to use an app like Hypnozio or find a registered hypnotherapist, good luck to you. Or if you've just enjoyed finding out how hypnosis works and how the world works, then hopefully this episode helped you learn a few interesting things about it, because I honestly was quite fascinated. It's always nice to feel a little bit wiser at the end of the day and understand the world around you. Some of the scientists working on hypnosis are pretty cool. Some of them are a bit rogue. One guy on the sleep hypnosis invited 200 women to his office to take a nap whilst he did hypnosis on them, which, I don't know, seems interesting. There's a great interview of him on Tim Ferriss, Dr. David Spiegel. I'll leave a link to that video in the description as well. And there we go. If you enjoyed the show, do shoot me some love or hate, whatever you want to do with this episode. It's up to you. I will respond to all my comments and emails, even if it does take me a surprising length of time to get around to it. So maybe I should get some hypnosis on my terrible email technique. Anyway, I do still hold my Wednesday afternoon slots completely open for people to book a free call with me for any reason whatsoever. I'm a pretty friendly person and like hearing what real humans in the world are up to who listen to my show. So if you've ever thought, this Sam guy sounds approachable, click the meeting link in the description and tell me your plan for the year or whatever you feel like. And I promise I won't hypnotize you to join my premium membership or pay me for something like coaching, which I don't even do. However, on the subject of premium membership, we are launching the book club finally this month, which I am absolutely digging. If you're looking to get more from books that you read and maybe wrestle with what it all means whilst debating it personally with me, it is possible if you go to supercast.com/growth mindset or hit the premium link in the description. On that, remember, life is short and don't wait around trying to get the hang of it all before letting yourself do the things that you actually want to do. Otherwise, your whole life will go by and you'll miss it. The only person that can give you permission to do anything is you. And now, look into my eyes, look into the eyes, the eyes, not around the eyes. Don't look around the eyes, look into my eyes. You're under. On your way home today, you will hug several trees for the hell of it. You'll message a friend you haven't spoken to in 6 months to tell them how great they are. You will most importantly remember to finally get round to leaving a positive review of the Growth Mindset podcast, which is your favorite podcast of all the podcasts. There is no better podcast in the world than the Growth Mindset podcast. 3, 2, 1. You're back in the room. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
Studies show we need time for information to sink in, so I'm going to give you a 5-second pause, silence, to reflect on one idea from the show before you jump back into your busy life. Ready and go.